Light Pollution News, September 2025. Quit messing with my Meridian flip. Today, we have a lot of policy-related activity. Smart policy is getting set up in Virginia, an amusement park that apparently flipped a bird to migrating birds, and reading the fine print in Pittsburgh's new LED conversion. Listen to all this and more as we have a new voice join us today. Mr. Steve Mariconda, an old friend, that being Mr. Frank Turina, returns. You'll definitely want to check this out. A new Light Pollution News is coming up next. Welcome to Light Pollution News. I'm your host, Bill McGeaney. We do this show twice a month, discussing the news in and around our nighttime environment. I'd like to welcome any new listeners we have with us today. Thank you for tuning in. You can find everything we discussed today on our show by heading over to our website, lightpollutionnews.com. There's also some links in your show notes, and you have a large amount of data right there at your fingertips. If you look in the show notes, you have all of our contact avenues and information, including you just text the show, you can email us, you can find all of our social media. We also have a show page that lists all of the articles we discussed today, including a summary and today's show narrative. If you like what we're doing, please consider supporting us. We're a listener-supported show. We don't have all of our costs covered, but every little bit truly helps. You can find the Support the Show link over in the show notes or over on our website right there under Support the Show. Speaking of which, we're looking to have some help on our social media front. My wife, Caitlin, who's been diligently working to grow her presence on social, has decided to take a step back, so we're looking for someone to fill those shoes. Unfortunately, we don't have the cash to make it a paid position at this time, but it is a good spot for anyone looking to cut their teeth and kind of grow their portfolio for future work opportunities. You get to actually really prove what you can do, and you have a portfolio on your backing. If you're interested, check out the Opportunities tab over on our website, lightpollutionnews.com. Jumping into this episode, I'm extraordinarily excited about this lineup. I have some great stuff to discuss today. I think you at home are really going to enjoy this one. From the great state of Colorado, I'm very eager to welcome back to the show my friend, Mr. Frank Turina. Frank, you have been an environmental educator. You are an environmental educator. You do astrophotography. You've been a stalwart with the U.S. National Park Service Night Sky program. You maintain a Night Sky Resource Center, a great fascinating blog that you really put a lot of time and effort into the stories on there. I love reading them. And I'm looking for some new stuff on there, Frank. What's going on? But Frank, welcome back to the show.
Thanks. Yeah, it's good to be here. Yeah, I know. I've been a little neglectful of my website, but I have been teaching more at University of Denver, and working on some new classes there, and trying to get students there at least exposed to this issue, trying to work it into some of the classwork and the classroom work. And so been putting a lot of effort into that. I do have some ideas for my next blog post, but I'll save that for another time.
Oh man, you're really not going to get any teasers.
No teasers right now.
So how is the class? Is it easy to integrate some of this topic, some of this stuff into the class material?
There's a lot of flexibility for students to choose an issue that they want to address or they want to dive into for the class. And most classes have some examination of some environmental issue or problem. And when I started teaching there, that the idea of light pollution or noise pollution, or more broadly, sort of like sensory ecology, really never came up. So I would always put a little plug in at the beginning of the class that, about what I do, and that, it's an important issue, and that, hey, if you're interested, this would be a great, issue to examine for your project. And plus, it's always good to, select a topic that your instructor has a lot of interest in, right? So I think, so I'm starting to see a little bit more people are kind of interested in getting exposed to the idea of, oh yeah, light pollution is a big issue. And then when you start learning about, all of the interactions and all of the effects on wildlife and human health and all of that, it really kind of resonates with a lot of students. So trying to find examples and opportunities to kind of work that into the the curriculum.
When you first started talking about this, there probably were a few students who even understood what the heck you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen that change? Do you see a lot more students coming in already kind of knowledgeable on the topic?
Yeah, I think that has changed. And I think, just in the popular press, there's been more coverage of the issue. There's, stories about, cities changing their street lights, or even they'll notice that, their neighborhood in Denver will have installed new street lights and kind of like, what's up with that? And then they learn about all the reasons why. And it's, so there is a little bit more awareness just from stories in the popular press that are starting to trigger people's thinking in terms of like, hey, this is an environmental issue that is really not addressed as as commonly as many others. So it's always there. I think for some students, that unique problem that nobody else is really thinking about is something that is really attractive.
Correct me where I'm wrong. I think you may be seeing some of that effect from things like social media and from just a broader culture, the impact of, say, something you do on your side, like astrophotography, and how that, that kind of seeps into the mainstream.
Yeah, I think that's something that, you do see so much more of. And I was thinking when I started astrophotography is like 2015 or something like that, there's a pretty small community of people who were practicing astrophotography. When COVID hit, the hobby just took off. There were 3 or 4 years from like 2020 to 2024 where I was trying to buy things. I was trying to buy equipment, from astronomy stores, and I couldn't get anything because everything was back ordered. And I would talk to the guys at the store, and they would be like, yeah, we can't keep things in stock. As soon as we get something in, they're gone. And so there was this real upsurge in the amount of astrophotographers and people doing deep sky photography and Milky Way photography. And it started flooding, social media. So I think that was something that was one of the drivers that has raised the awareness for students who are showing up in my classes, and they're a little more aware of the issue because, most of the people that do night sky photography, there's always a little bit of always the, hey, look how cool this picture is. But there's also usually a little bit of a, like, hey, this is a resource that's under threat. And so along with the, hey, this is a really cool image, there's also a little bit of an educational piece where people are starting to understand that, these are really cool images, but the opportunities to see a night sky like this are diminishing very quickly. So yeah, I think that is sort of the way things have been going. I don't know, for the last, like I said, since COVID, and they're continuing to increase the awareness of the issue.
Well, that's a great segue into my other guest here today, and that's Steve Mariconda. And Steve, you were just telling me before the show, we had a little chat. I like to kind of just converse with the guests to kind of, get everyone's nice warmed up, get a little banter going beforehand. And you were telling me you were up in the Catskills and you were binocular observing, which is something that is extremely hard in your home state of New Jersey. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that? How successful were you with that? Were you looking at Messier objects, or what were you looking at?
I look for some Messier objects. I'm still honestly learning like a lot of the details of all the different Messier objects and such. I just really just love scanning the sky, either whether it be naked eye or with binoculars. I'm really just a fan of almost like the mindfulness aspect of it. Just being able to see thousands of stars is just amazing in itself. I don't know.
It kind of puts you in your place, right? Because when you look at, I always love, because I've telling you earlier, I have these a pair of 100 millimeter binos that they're the most fun toy most impractical, but most fun toy you can ever have. And looking up through the Milky Way, just gauging, looking at, seeing the star clusters and seeing all these dense areas. And it really kind of sets you in your place, right? Like it tells you that, hey, you know what? Like you're such a small, tiny, infinitesimal fraction of this whole universe.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? You are part of the Saddlebrook Green Team. You're a dark sky delegate, and you have recently completed your master's in public health. So, Steve, who are you?
I've always been like kind of an outdoors kind of person. I love hiking, swimming, kayaking, and such. And I've always had a general interest in astronomy. And about 3 years ago or so, I started learning about light pollution and stuff. And I really hadn't thought about it that much before, but I realized I really couldn't see that many stars where I live. And, I'm about 10 miles from New York City as the crow flies. And started looking at those light pollution maps. And I was like, oh, I want to go venture out at this spot in the Catskills about, 100 miles north of me in New York State. And I was like, I'm going to go check that out. And I was just blown away by the difference being able to see like the Milky Way and thousands of stars and such. And so I kind of became hooked and just determined to get more involved with Dark Sky International, join the Slack channel, connected with other advocates. Then eventually I helped start the New Jersey chapter. There's a very active advocate down in Toms River named James Webster. Been involved for a while. He's the head of an astronomy club down there. And yeah, that basically took off from there. Started advocating at my mayor and council meeting to have a light pollution ordinance, which we actually got passed in June. So
congrats.
And
Awesome.
Yeah. And I'm just passionate about spreading the word about light pollution. It's definitely picking up in New Jersey in terms of awareness of it. Like we've been doing work with environmental commissions and green teams. Each municipality in New Jersey can set up an environmental commission to advise mayor and councils, and same with green teams, which are a little more informal. But educating about environmental issues in town and such, and light pollution is just one of those things where once you tell people about it, they get it, and it's like something that is actionable as opposed to cleaning up the air or the soil or the water. It takes a long time. Right, light pollution can be fixed by flicking a switch or just directing the lights where you need it. So anyway, I hope I'm not playing too much, but
no, I mean, Steve, I would have thought, and it's my Pennsylvania bias here, that New Jersey is probably the worst spot to advocate for responsible practices and ordinances.
it is a little tough, not gonna lie, but I think there's like this craving for reducing it because the light pollution is so bad in New Jersey. Yeah. There's a couple of little spots where you can see some of the Milky Way.
I'm curious about the coast. Are the skies a lot better over the Atlantic?
Yes. I was just in Long Beach Island in June and was actually very surprised that I could see the Milky Way over there. Not facing the ocean. I could see it. If you looked, back towards the coast,
right.
But yeah, those are definitely little safe havens there. And if they just, it's because they're oceanfront towns, they should really be focusing on the wildlife aspect, sea turtles and such like that.
Yeah.
Could really improve those areas.
I've never seen it there, Frank, but I know Kevin from Cape May Astro, who was on last time you were on.
Right.
He takes photos of the Milky Way from Cape May, from South Jersey all the time.
Yeah. I think, a couple of things when we were working with Cape Hatteras National Seashore, the views of the Milky Way and the stars over the ocean were so much, better, obviously, than if you turned 90 degrees and looked inland, right? And the other thing is that kind of related to that is I remember hearing from a ranger at Gateway National Park, or Gateway National Seashore, I can't remember, in New York City, basically. And he said that after Christmas, everybody gets telescopes for Christmas, and then they head to Gateway to see the stars because it's kind of the best spot because you can look out over the ocean, you can see lots of things with the telescope. And so he's like, we get a bunch of people showing up here in January with their new telescopes, and because that view to the east is still pretty good.
Yeah,
it's no lie. I know when we go down Florida, looking out the window with a small pair of binoculars, you can look through the southern sky because that's where the ocean is. And if it's not too foggy or what have you there, you have a beautiful view of the sky.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we get started? Since we're talking about trying to view from these highly light polluted areas, Bortle 9s, as you say, Steve, because I think I'm pretty much in there with you. Bortle 8, Bortle 9, I don't know what the hell I am, but I'm really close to it. So for you or for me, we know, and you at home, you've heard the term a light pollution filter probably. People who are in astronomy or astrophotography are definitely aware of light pollution filters. Well, what if you could have that in a form of glasses? Wouldn't that be neat? Well, your dream has come true. The Japanese company Kento Tokino offers relatively normal-looking glasses, relatively. They come with a black frame, rectangular lenses that appear to protrude just far enough from the face to look suspicious. So they're maybe not the best for driving, but maybe, they might be great for today's bright lights. Who wants to have a pair of just normal-looking light pollution glasses? Literal glasses.
I'm a little skeptical of these. Just, I think it's a great idea, but I know just from using light pollution filters with astrophotography, they're designed to focus and remove mostly the wavelengths that correspond to light pollution, to like mercury vapor lighting and LED lighting. Filtering out LED lights is very difficult because they're so broadband, right? So with mercury vapor and the more like amber lights, you can really zero in on those wavelengths, those reddish wavelengths, and kind of cut that out of the thing. Broadband is very difficult to remove. So LEDs are very difficult to filter out. But, maybe I've gotten better since I've used some of the filters, but I'm a little skeptical. The other thing is that, that to reduce those light levels in those specific frequencies, you kind of reduce the overall light level that's going to be hitting your eye. So I would think you're going to make the dark sky, or make the sky look less bright and less brilliant. That's, again, just coming from my experience using these kinds of filters on astrophotography. So count me as skeptical.
well, Frank, they're the old school ones that block out the high pressure sodiums. So yeah, okay. Yeah. So it would be more contrast, right?
Yeah.
Terrible so for walking. You don't want to be walking with these things.
Yeah. So you're looking for that dark background, right? You're trying to get a darker background.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we start off today's episode with some hopeful news. Down in Virginia, Rappahannock County, the Planning Commission greenlit a new expansion of their current outdoor lighting ordinance that now includes residential and county structures. The previous ordinance only pertained to commercial activities. The new proposed ordinance was passed by the Planning Commission back on July 16th. It was headed to the county commissioners for final approval right around the time of this recording. I did not find a vote yet to be out there on this, so it'll probably come out right after I record this. But if you're not aware of where Rappahannock County is in Virginia, it sits south of Winchester and kind of between Front Royal, Culpeper, and Luray, Virginia. So it's kind of like north central Virginia, that area. So good news, great way to start the show. Any good news? I know, Steve, you mentioned that there's a light pollution ordinance on the books out in your hometown, as you just mentioned, right?
Well, yeah, a couple of municipalities are passing ordinances. My town of Saddlebrook, we passed an ordinance that I helped write along with the township planner. It took about a year of trial and error getting the language right. But anyway, it's not going to apply to street lights or residential lighting, but it is going to apply to commercial lighting and municipal lighting that's used to illuminate parking lots and such. Yeah, I was actually pleasantly surprised at how receptive my mayor and council were, and the planning board and zoning board were towards this ordinance. So Steve, yeah.
When you say they were receptive to it, were they, why were they receptive to it?
I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's because I just kept showing up like every month. they just like trusted that this will improve like I guess the aesthetics of the town, and just that it'd be good for the environment. They're trying to do something that's, because we're in a very congested area, tons of car traffic through the area. Like, I think the municipality wants to show they're doing something to like improve the environment and stuff. Which is why I also helped start the green team in our town. like I said, each municipality can start a green team, which is basically residents gathering together and trying to do green projects, and such as passing ordinances like this, noise ordinances, lighting ordinances. There's a town, Mendham, that just passed one. Like a lot of these efforts are being done by environmental commissions. And we did a talk, New Jersey chapter did a talk for this association called the Association for New Jersey Environmental Commissions back in December. And there was like 50 municipalities represented there. And I think that's really was like the spark. Like once we did that, all these other environmental commissions were reaching out to us for us to come do talks or do green fairs, like tabling events. And there's just this interest among municipalities to just adopt these ordinances, you know. So
that's really great stuff. That's great to hear that there's so much interest out there around New York.
Yeah. Because I think it's because we know how much we're missing out. When people take vacations once in a while, it's like the Grand Canyon or something. They're just like, holy crap! Like,
right.
So I'm trying to bring that to New Jersey. You know,
Frank, anything good on your end? On your obviously, we spoke earlier about something that will be on next show, but
yeah. But yeah, just a little bit of a teaser on that we were talking about Breckenridge becoming a Night Sky certified, which I think is great news. I think it sets a good precedent for all the little mountain towns, you know, west of Denver. And, you know, if we can kind of get a little bit of an upswell in those types of communities looking at Night Sky certification, that would be fantastic. Because I think, you know, once you get west of Denver, maybe 30 or 40 miles, you know, you're starting to get in, you know, you lose a little bit of the light pollution from Denver a little bit, and you start getting a lot more from towns like, you know, Breckenridge and Steamboat Springs and Vail and Aspen and, you know, those are become the more dominant light pollution sources. So it's good news. It's good precedent, and I hope it catches on.
I remember being out in, I think it was Aspen. Yeah, it was Aspen maybe 10 years ago. And it didn't seem like there was bad lighting in Aspen. Is it mostly from the ski resorts?
Yeah, it's not bad. I think, you know, there's sort of this vibe, right, in ski towns where, you know, lower lighting and, you know, outdoor fires and things like that. You sort of want this more of an ambiance. You don't want to have a fire when
there's a bright, you know, 5,000 Kelvin LED light.
Exactly. Right. So it's more of an ambiance kind of thing that I would say, in my experience, just from visiting these towns, you know, not from any sort of data collection or anything, but it seems like a lot of the towns tend to like a little bit more of a, you know, lower Kelvin type of light. But they're all sort of, a lot of them are getting the bug as well for, you know, switching to LEDs and getting the reaping the benefits economically from the cost reductions. And so, you know, I think it's a little bit of a, you know, there's still that pressure on them, the economic pressure to switch to LEDs. But I think a lot of them are a little hesitant just because of the vibe, right? And the feel of a mountain town and during ski season. But I think it's still a good,
you want the vibe.
Yeah. I think it's still a great, like I said, precedent that Breckenridge pursued this and got the certification, because I think a lot of other towns will kind of follow suit.
Well, since we're here in the policy world, there's a piece in New York Times that many people listening probably have already seen. It was forwarded over to the show by a friend of the show, astronomer Diane Turnshek. Pittsburgh is the home of many things. Obviously, they have a lot of bridges, a great steel culture, and they have one of my favorite burgers that you can get as a salad up in Bullfrog Brewery in Williamsport, PA, which is fries baked into the bottom of your salad because you have to have your fries on top of your burger out there. And this piece came to me because the Pittsburgh passed a lighting ordinance, a dark sky ordinance, and then they also have implemented a new LED conversion. And the new conversion is with including color temperatures below 3,000 Kelvin, supposedly with timers, dimmers, and motion sensors. The color the color the city selected ended up being 2,700, but None of that actually applies to any of the bridges, which they have a bazillion of in Pittsburgh, because they're managed by the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, which is a totally separate entity than stuff that's covered under the city ordinance. Now, the paragraph I want to mention in this New York Times article, which I found really interesting because it sits towards the end. You could almost kind of glance over it, but I think it's really impactful, is that Jacob Williams, one of the press officers for Pittsburgh, passively mentions that residents could petition the city to dim the lights and request shielding. And that to me sounds like the same old song and dance we hear from a lot of municipalities that are doing these LED installations. In fact, Pittsburgh, in order to have your street lights dimmed, you need to have a consensus from your neighborhood, which I think feels, I don't know how you guys feel, it feels like an impossible bar to overcome, to have that actually set in place. It seems clear as day to me that the city, just like other municipalities, they install street lighting and they pass the onus of any kind of resolution of problems onto the recipient who had no voice really in the installation. So do you guys think having protocols like this in place that are specifically designed to minimize the implementation of responsible lighting practices, or is it to keep the peace among the neighbors because everyone should have a vote in how their neighbor decides that, one neighbor thinks it's too bright, one neighbor thinks it's too dim. So how do we handle this?
Good question. It's probably the latter, about just not wanting to annoy the town's residents or upset people. They want to make the most amount of people happy, I guess. But I mean, I think in general, like, if the township, like a municipality has like an engineer, right? And if they should just be using, like, I guess, IES principles say, like, I guess just like to actually know what the light levels should be for streetlights. I mean, if they're educated about that, like, they should be making those decisions kind of top down. If there are complaints, obviously people can bring it up. But
well, Steve, I want to point this out. Like, in no case do you have light levels start at the original level and then work their way up. Right, they're automatically at max, and then you have to find a way to trigger it down. And to me, that sounds like you're really making it a near impossible scenario for anyone who doesn't like that level to be max, right? You're putting all of the onus on those people. They didn't ask for this change. You came in and decided to make it as bright as the sun, and now they have to find a way to go through bureaucracy to make this adjustment. And it can take anywhere from 1 to like 50 tries to get this updated, right? And that's, to me, that's how, this seems like a cost savings, I guess, or a cost hedging approach by these municipal governments. Frank, what are your thoughts on this? I know you have some good takes here.
I think it strikes me as bad policy making, right? So your policy should be developed with community input along the way, right? I know a lot of times these streetlight projects are not done that way. They're sort of the maintenance department or the transportation department, says, oh, we can save all this money if we install these streetlights. Let's go for the most efficient lighting, which is maybe 4,000 Kelvin, and save as much as we possibly can. And then they just go ahead and do it. And it isn't done with community input in mind. And I think that is the heart of the problem, is that, when you develop policy, whether you're at the federal government or the state government or local government, going out and talking to your constituents and getting a sense of what is going to work best, what's going to get, your community to buy into the policy is a critical piece to the process. And I think when cities or towns or states do this without that input, you end up with exactly the situation that you're talking about, Bill. Where it's like, it's terrible, and then you got to fight to make it better. So yeah, I think that, it just comes down to just a bad policy process and not getting out there and knocking on doors and having public meetings and getting input and showing people examples of the streetlights that you're going to put up, that you're thinking about putting up, and getting some input before you do it. And, to kind of get things sort of to grease the skids, right? For for adoption and acceptance by the community.
Well, sometimes the communities have ordinances and laws on the books. And this comes to us from the Hartford Current and the authors Sean Croftsick. I'm trying with that name. I don't know. I guess that's good. I highly recommend you take a read of this link when you have a moment. We have past guest and co-founder of the Coalition to Reduce Light Pollution in Connecticut, Leo Smith. He sued the Connecticut Judicial Branch for ignoring a state statute that requires lighting located on state property to be turned off if it's non-essential outdoor lighting between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. daily. Smith requested a sizable amount of information from the state, which includes a fixture-by-fixture audit within the Connecticut courthouses to ensure compliance. Leo also went down a path to a couple of years ago when he first notified Laura Hovino, the facilities manager at the Connecticut Judicial System, that the decorative lighting was out of compliance with the law. Well, March 10th of this year, Smith sent a follow-up inquiry to the chief court administrator, to Elizabeth Bizzuto, whom in turn decided that being a law-abiding judge was a bit too much to ask, and issued a directive to kind of circumvent the initial statute by saying that all exterior lightings are essential, despite the fact that decorative lighting serve no essential purpose. Per Smith, this directive was issued 1.5 years after the law entered into effect. The state intends to file a motion to dismiss. As of this date, is still being worked through, and I know there's supposed to be a hearing right around the time of this recording, so I assume it's coming up right after this recording. We have laws in place, as evidently in Connecticut, and what prevents, I guess I don't understand why this is such a hard thing for the courthouse to comply with. Judge Bizzuto seemed to be in alignment with other people within the courthouse that we don't need to turn off these lights. I don't know. What do you do when your court system is deciding that the law doesn't apply to them? What do you do there?
Yeah, it's very ironic, right? That the legal system is the one that's breaking the law or not complying with the law and refuses to do anything to come into compliance. Yeah, I think it's just completely ironic. But in the policy world, there's this sort of a truism that most policies fail in implementation and enforcement. You can have a great job. You can get policies passed. You can work together to get laws written, but the reason that they don't work usually isn't because they were written poorly. It's because they just aren't implemented correctly. So this is another example where the implementation is just failing, and it's just amazing that it just happens to be the court system that it's like failing to implement the policy.
Oh, you gotta love it. And I wonder how much of this, just surmising here, I wonder how much of it is just whatever the current setup with the lighting is. Maybe it's something as simple as this, where they have no control, or they have no way to control the lighting, and the additional cost is just not, they just don't have a budget for that cost. I don't know. Giving them benefit of doubt here. Steve, I see you smiling over there.
Well, yeah, it just seems like maybe they're not fully aware of why light pollution is a problem in the first place, or why the policy is there in the first place. I guess in general, people need to, especially regulators, need to care enough to enforce these policies. In terms of, I don't know. It's just flicking a switch when the lighting is not needed after a certain time. It doesn't seem too difficult, but
that's what I would think. Right. Yeah. Well, anyway, we here in America, we have a lot of fun stuff going on. So when a judge says, I'm not going to abide by this law, it doesn't feel that unnatural at the current time. Well, over in Portland, Oregon, the Oaks Amusement Park decided to install a new 135.5-foot ride that will shoot up 8 LED spotlights into the night sky. Now, what kind of makes that unique is that It's adjacent to Portland's first migratory bird park. Actually, the wildlife area, if you look on a map, kind of surrounds this amusement park. The city approved the amusement park ride to be built, along with the spotlights to be set up to illuminate the sky. In Portland, they should, by the ordinance, they're supposed to be all downward focused lights. That was not good enough for Oaks Amusement Park. So the ride is slated to be operational through all of migration season, which spurred the coalition of nonprofits to file an appeal. And these included the Bird Alliance of Oregon, Green Spaces Institute, and the Friends of Oaks Bottom. By Portland code, lighting obviously has to be aimed downward, but has to be shielded and of a warm temperature. The Oaks Amusement Park filed to be exempt from the code. And in an effort at the end of the day to kind of throw a dog a bone, they said, hey, you know what? We'll make them warmer. We'll make the lights warmer for you. Don't worry about it. We got your back. We'll make those warm colors that we shoot up into the sky. Past guest Nick Messler said it best, that these lights have no safety purpose and are purely aesthetic, and approving them would set a dangerous precedent that recreational ambience outweighs conservation. But per the arbiter, City Hearings Officer David Doman, he denied the appeal by the environmental group, saying that Oaks Park is required to minimize but not eliminate negative environmental impacts. Well, at least the color of the light's changing. Frank, have you encountered anything quite like that in your time?
You know, it reminds me of the issue with the Freedom Towers in Manhattan and on 9/11 when the lights were shining straight up, and there's many images and videos of birds being trapped in those light columns, which I think they have addressed, and that they do turn the lights off.
They seem to do like a periodic.
Yeah. And let the birds escape that column. And then, you know, the other thing is there are also some images online that I've seen of the Luxor pyramid thing in Las Vegas with its beam that shoots straight up. There's also images of birds being kind of trapped in that light beam. So yeah, so there's no shortage of evidence that shows that those types of lighting in general, but also beams of light are terrible for migratory birds. And, you know, a lot of migratory birds fly, you know, do their migration at night. So they get trapped in these light columns. I guess from what little understanding of that, I guess red, you know, or a more amber color is better, but I don't think it eliminates the risk for migratory birds.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. Frank, the thing about this guy is it's situated in a wildlife preserve area, so surrounded by this bird sanctuary essentially, and the amusement park feels no obligation to actually be a good citizen here, and they're saying, you know what, we're just going to do what we want to do, but you know it'll be fine. The birds will get used to it. You know. These are decorative lights. These aren't, you know, lights that people may perceive to be necessary for someone walking or driving or anything like that. These are purely aesthetic, hedonistic lights. There's no benefit from these lights.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like the municipality in which the park is located needs to enforce the ordinance in place.
I think that last piece, I would love to, you know, if any of you are listening out there, I'd love to understand this last piece where Oaks Park is required to minimize, not eliminate, negative environmental impacts. That piece right there, I'm not sure how they're minimizing, honest to God, but whatever. That's what it is. Well, how about this? You guys, you know, you guys have been to Hollywood, I'm sure. Who here hasn't been to Hollywood? Steve, you been to Hollywood?
I've been to Hollywood.
Yeah, and Frank, I'm sure you've been to Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
It's not the greatest. I don't think it's the greatest place on earth. But you know, how would you feel if you lived in Hollywood and you had a new Tesla restaurant pop up right next to you? So this comes to us via the 404 Media. Everyone's good buddy, good pal, good friend, Elon Musk, and his Tesla team opened up a new diner in Hollywood. During construction, security lighting was purportedly aimed directly at the neighboring residences, with one lady, Kristen Rose, was quoted as saying that the light flashing is so bright into her apartments, goes all night, Even with the blinds closed, it feels like we're at the world's worst rave. Through construction and once operational, as you would expect, the noise level caused annoyances for neighbors. But then if you haven't seen pictures of this facility, in short, it's a nighttime nightmare with two giant LED screens that shows movies and has a thick ribbon light circling the roof facade. Now, I'm going to flip that over here because, yes, it's fun and it's kind of the thing that we do right now to kind of beat up on Tesla. But no, the screens don't stay on all night. In fact, when you're sitting there enjoying your Tesla burger that used to come out in a box resembling a Cybertruck, I guess they're having some financial difficulties at the moment, so it just comes out as a burger. and you happen to be relaxing in your car while it's charging, and you dial in and listen to the audio and two screens. It kind of looks like something out of the Jetsons or something, like it's a futuristic Sonic, right? So, hey, you guys up for taking a trip out to the Tesla diner, whatever the hell it's called?
Yeah, I'll pass.
Oh, come on, Frank. You haven't lived. Well, let's stay in LA because this is an interesting piece too. And I know we've seen this. A lot of times you'll see, especially local news channels, they love doing this, talking about how there's a light out, everyone's going to die, no one's going to survive. And it typically comes because there's copper theft, and someone actually stole the copper out of that light, and now it's not functioning. And there's been unfortunate cases where, someone's gotten killed because, they blame it on the light. Really, it's the road, the way they engineered the road, that's the problem. But it's unfortunate cases that I know we've had on the show where, that the street light was undone by the copper theft. So in LA, what if tariffs could actually reduce the street lighting copper thefts? It's an interesting idea. Crosstown, the publication, identified that broken streetlight complaints were down by almost half against the 2024 numbers. Past 3 years seems to be the highest vandalism of streetlights in a decade. And that was until the 2024 election. And they want to attribute this to tariffs, citing that copper prices have recently dropped around 22% in conjunction with a tariff announcement at the time of recording. However, as is the case with streetlights, their assessment probably doesn't hold up here. Copper prices have been hovering at or just below record levels since March of this year. And if you look at that little dip, it's not a big dip. It's still hovering at record levels. So it looks like another streetlight myth, maybe busted. But in response to rampant copper theft, LA has a plan. And keep in mind that this takes place in either broad daylight or under the cover of a lit street lamp, these thefts. LA is looking to the sun, and despite the higher price tag, the reduced cost of maintenance and repair has made solar street lighting a viable option. And according to Canary Media, LA is installing 1,100 solar streetlight fixtures and plans to install 400 more in areas with the highest copper theft. Have any of you guys seen these solar lights in action? I haven't seen one. I know I'm going to have one on a path I take because they've been installing them all summer, but I have yet to see them in operation.
I have not.
Me neither. I've just seen streetlights with solar cells where it'll turn on once the sun goes down, but it's not powered by solar.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how these work. I will report back, and I'm sure it won't work the way I wish it would work. But
I think that the thing is so ironic again is that just that these, you guys last month, I think, covered the idea of crime and lighting very well. It's like there's a lot of discussion last month on that topic. And this is a great example of, okay, if lighting was so good at deterring, crime like copper theft, you would think that, the lighting that doing it right under a street light, that just, kind of makes you wonder, well, is lighting really effective at deterring crime?
Right,
yeah, I just think
they're probably doing it on cloudy days. That's probably it.
That must be it. Yeah. So I just thought that was kind of funny and ironic in a way that you're talking about crime being committed directly under a street light, on a street light. So it just doesn't. I think it's just another little bit of information that sort of defeats that idea that, massive lighting deters crime.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. This is one of those things where I always laugh and chuckle that, we talk about how light, and the solution typically ends up being you need more light and you need more light and more light and more light and more light. And then you need more light on top of that. And that solves everything and makes everyone happy, and the world becomes singing kumbaya, and there's never again going to be any kind of crime out there. But really, it's the right kind of light, and it's the appropriate amount of light and the targeted amount of light. So this is a great way to go over to the other news we had out of Virginia this month. And as some of you listeners may have recalled, we just had the Why It's So Bright at Night, where I interviewed 3 of the members of the Citizens for Responsible Lighting down in Norfolk. And after sustained efforts, after presentation, community involvement, working with their elected officials, Dominion Energy, by God, will now be offering a 2700 Kelvin option for the city of Norfolk. The group feels that despite the recent nudge in the right direction, there's still a lot more left to do. For instance, one of the issues was the replacement of decorative fixtures that were converted to LEDs. To that end, they're working with Dominion to improve all of these fixtures and overall service. So again, the right kind of lighting, that's really what you need in place. And you have an environment where people feel safer and they actually are able to not have to worry about that kind of the glary impact. So if anyone at home is listening, what would your advice be to how you could ever manage change in your community? What would that be?
I'll speak to that. It's really just about getting the community involved and just doing that general education. You get enough community buy-in. That's my purpose with my green team in Saddlebrook. Just getting enough awareness where if 9 out of 10 people aren't interested, but that one person is, reach enough people, and you have enough people to show up at mayor and council meetings demanding that we can make a change with the lighting, right?
Steve, how long have you how many meetings did you have to go to?
For the mayor and council, I guess it took about a year. And it's not that they weren't bought into it right away, the mayor and council, but it was more so the editing process and back and forth with the town planner for the language in the ordinance, because the ordinance was overly complicated at first. And then Dark Sky International released that new 2024 version, which was simpler than their 2011 version. So I took that into consideration and made some modifications. But
was there any objection from any of the energy company, any municipality type utility?
There wasn't, except for the fact that they, towards about a month before passage of the ordinance, they exempted streetlights, just because the minute our town does not own the streetlights, and they didn't want to. They want to put that down the road towards they didn't know if the building department could regulate the streetlights, and it is easier to regulate streetlights when the municipality actually owns the streetlights. So, but down the road, I definitely want to get involved with the planning board there, trying to see if we can actually talk to the utility and get some better streetlights. Because the 2700 Kelvin fully cut off streetlights are available on the market. Just got to specify what we want.
What kind of streetlights do you guys currently have there?
There's a lot of high pressure sodium, partially shielded fixtures. There are some full cutoff fixtures in the induction. It's 5,000 Kelvin, but it's very dim. Those are not too bad, actually. The street lighting is not the worst aspect, I find, of light pollution in this area. It really is commercial corridors, those floodlights, those LED floodlights that they have on the building facade shining outward like that. Those are really the worst. And so that's from that. Luckily, the ordinance applies to those. So we're trying to, get that.
Yeah. No, I found the street lighting is by and large, it's not the most offensive. Yeah, I agree with you on that. I want to hit this article and then we'll switch gears off of this topic of policy. But over in the UK, over in Scotland, Galloway Forest Park they obtained dark sky status back in 2009, if anyone remembers when that was. According to Wikipedia, it's the largest forest in all of the UK, and the park suffered a devastating fire back in 2021 that saw the demise of their 10-year-old public observatory. The company Wind2 proposed to install a new Monarch Energy Park, which is going to be adjacent to this park, this Galloway Forest Park, which is a very large park. The park, which is also slated to include solar paneling, is slated to start off with 9 wind turbines that will stand taller than the Empire State Building, and with red aircraft avoidance lights to sit atop. Comments over there closed back on July 18th and had to be made to the Scottish government. So we have a situation where people in this neck of the world are a little bit concerned about the dark skies. I don't have much. I've not experienced, thankfully, these wind turbine lights. And I keep hearing from people, when I talk to people or when I see news articles like out in Washington or, maybe off the coast somewhere, that they are problematic. Have any of you guys seen these turbine lights?
We when I was with the Park Service, this issue came up every now and then where there was sometimes it was offshore, sometimes it was on land. There were, wind turbine farms being proposed. And as the Night Sky program, Park Service would make recommendations for not having continuous lights, having them more of a strobe effect. And there's some research on the ultimate or the best periodicity for the strobe, right? Like how often should it blink? The color temperature again is important. Having a red blinking light rather than a broadband light. There's also some technology available that will turn the lights on whenever an aircraft is in the vicinity. So it's radar based. The FAA can implement that. So there are some things that can be done for wind turbine farms that can reduce the effects of the lighting. In offshore, when you can look at, typically there's some light proposed at the where the tower meets the water for ship navigation and things like that. There's some things you can recommend for, reducing impacts from those lights. Again, so there are, people have thought about this issue. There are some things that can be done. There's some good research out there that kind of backs up certain best practices for turbine lighting.
Yeah, I've seen the stories that come out saying about the radio controlled lighting, and I wonder. I didn't see anything on this particular piece up there in, what is it called, the Galloway Forest Park. There wasn't a particular mention of having kind of a radio controlled lighting. I've never seen these actually in action. Do they really impact the night sky, Frank?
I think a lot of it, one of the concerns that we had was more wildlife. So a lot of these wind farms, especially the ones offshore, are either right on your migratory paths for birds. And so, I'm not sure it's the one thing that we looked at was sort of it's when you're looking from the shore offshore, right? Like we were just talking about earlier, the night sky is the best offshore. And so having something that sort of distracts you from seeing the stars is a concern. I don't know if we've quantified exactly how much light pollution the tower lighting would add to the night sky. No, but we did, but we were concerned with migratory birds. We were concerned with the experience of like park visitors looking offshore to, and seeing the lights, off at a distance. So,
and Frank, real fast, you said about migratory birds. Would they be pulled to the light from the towers?
Yeah, it's a distraction, especially if it's a broadband light. I think there are some stories or some research maybe of birds circling those types of lights until they just reach a point of exhaustion. And so those are some of the concerns that we had with those lights. And I think with the radio controlled and the radar controlled lights, it was, I think the FAA There are certain conditions that have to be met for the FAA to consider those types of systems. I don't know exactly what they are, but I know that there is a process within the FAA that that considers those types of systems when they're appropriate. But I'm not sure exactly what those conditions would be.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. Do you guys have a few more minutes? I won't mind clearing out the rest of these articles here because I like these articles. Mm-hmm. So first up, from switching gears away from all this policy nonsense and all the, installations and all that stuff. Well, here's some data center news, I guess you could say. Maybe warehouse news, probably the best way to put it. I know you at home probably thinking about this. I find myself pondering it. What would it be to actually stargaze under Bortle 1 skies? Done it once in my life. I don't know if you at home have done it. I don't know if any of you guys have done it. I feel like, Frank, you probably do it all the time.
I wish.
But specifically, what would it be like to do deep sky astrophotography in perfect dark skies? Well, an astrophotographer by the name of Bray Falls started a business, Starfront Observatories. In short, it's a roll-off roofed set of warehouses that contain individual telescope setups. The setup is located in Central Texas, which boasts around 220 clear nights a year. It's climate controlled and allows for mount customization. And of course, you need to buy all of your gear first to bring it all down. While the price point is pretty high, for instance, $99 a month to host something as small as a C-Star telescope, which retails around $500, to on the high end, it goes upwards of $800 for larger setups. You get a pier, you have, all the electric and everything set up. It didn't stop this venture from taking off, despite this high cost. There's a lot of demand. Frank, you're talking about the demand for this earlier in the show. Starfront Observatories is now the largest remote observatory. Only a year in, and the company has 11 warehouses with over 450 telescopes, all remote, all controlled via an app. Frank, have you looked at any of these?
Yeah, I have actually. I have actually, right? So there's, when you're into astrophotography, if you're in the northern hemisphere, there's an entire half of the night sky that you never see, right? And so one way, other than lugging all your gear south of the equator, is to, go to one of these off-site, sites where you can rent a telescope, control it from your computer. And so you can image all of these awesome nebula and galaxies that you can't see from up here in the north. And they're just incredibly popular. I did look into that because there are some really cool nebula in the southern part of the sky that I can't see that I wanted to image. And I never actually did it, but I looked into a lot of them down there. And I know there's several now in New Mexico has a couple that are very popular. And, so it's definitely something that is very popular and is, like I said, more people get into this hobby. It's getting more and more popular. So I'm not surprised that Bray is doing really well with this. So when I started, I was saying earlier that when I started with astrophotography, it was a pretty small community and we all knew of each other. We may not have, met face to face, but we all kind of knew, oh, this guy's doing this in Texas and this guy's doing it and so we kind of knew and I knew of Bray. He was very good very early. He was one of those people you kind of were jealous of right away because he was doing it for like a year and just getting these incredible images. He's a fantastic astrophotographer. And, so he's very dedicated to this hobby and I think this is a great business adventure.
Well, taking it from our point of view here for the show, right? You business-minded folks at home that were looking to crank out some serious dollars for those dark skies. Well, according to Fast Company, Starfront's business model looks to be primarily a rental space with services, right? However, customers can sublet out their equipment. The company is looking to capitalize on the folks who might be less financially endowed by offering a full soup to nuts telescope and pier rental package. You may not even have to buy your own equipment. You could actually just rent the equipment right down there. The business itself is a partnership between astrophotography personality Bray Falls and space sector entrepreneur veterans Josh Kim, Dustin Gibson, and Nate Hanks. So the model itself is pretty simplistic, right? And they offer additional services for value adds and whatnot. Starfront didn't have first mover advantage or other groups or other companies that were doing this. They didn't have much brand recognition when they came in. They were able to set a lower price point. Is this how you monetize dark skies?
I think for a very, very dedicated subset of people, yes. This is what we, as astrophotographers, what we live for. Like the opportunity to, image from a Bortle 1 area is like, it doesn't get any better than that, obviously. And, when you're sitting there and you're losing detail in your image because of the light pollution that you're having to shoot through. It's really frustrating, right? Because there's detail in this nebula that I'm not able to pick up because I'm shooting through all of this light pollution from Denver. And so when you have a really good dark sky, you don't have that. And so you get this amazing amount of detail, right? Little squirrels and bumps and things in the clouds and these nebula are vivid. And where if I try to do that here on my deck, I don't get that kind of resolution. I don't get that kind of detail because of the light pollution. And so that's one of the reasons that these offsite observatories are so popular. And, like I said, you're right. So the business model is you can take your equipment down there, set it up, and then operate it from your desktop at home. And then any kind of maintenance, if a cable breaks or if a cable gets snagged, there's somebody there to fix it for you. And so you're paying for that. But you can also rent really high-end telescopes and control them yourself from your PC. So yeah, it is a very effective way to monetize night skies, dark skies for this very radical, like fanatic group of people who will do anything to shoot from a Bortle 1 sky.
Well, Frank, do you think it democratizes dark skies?
I think it gives access to people that if you're sort of into it, you're sort of dabbling in the idea that maybe I'll get a telescope and I've seen all these great images. I might want to try to do that. It's a great entry point, right? So before you shell out, $1,500, $2,000 for a mount, you can try it out. See if you like it. See if you like, being awake at 1 o'clock in the morning, messing with your Meridian flip. I mean, it's some people love that. I love that. The other people I always want to be in bed, right?
You like messing with your Meridian flip there?
I
don't know, Frank.
So I think it's a great way for people who are kind of curious about the hobby to kind of tiptoe into it.
I hear you. Well, it is an interesting proposition, and it is making money in dark skies. So it's got that going for it. Let's close out this episode by looking at the healing power of light if done right. Over in Changsha, China, which is located in Hunan province, is a bodega shopkeeper named Sun Meiwa. She located, I gather, in an alleyway. Meiwa leaves a light on all night to help women and girls feel safe in the after hours. The light looks like a fluorescent light bulb tube angled downward over the front of her shop. She's kept it on late for over a decade, but it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop just at the light. Meiwa also adjusted her store hours to close at 2 a.m. and keeps an old dial phone on premise for folks, typically, or namely, I guess, elderly or young who may not actually have cellular service. So for all this, the 60-year-old has garnered the nickname Street Light Auntie from her community. And it's a nice little way to close out today's show. I want to thank my guests today, Steve Mariconda and Frank Turina. Thank you guys for stopping by. Steve, do you have a place where people can learn about what you're doing or anything you want to plug?
Yeah, you can check out the Dark Sky New Jersey Facebook page or the Saddlebrook Green Team. We're also on Facebook with the Dark Sky New Jersey website, which is the Astronomy Association of Tom's River / Dark Sky. You just look up on Google. And yeah.
Great. Frank, where can people go to learn about what you're doing and your Night Sky Resource Center that needs to be updated?
Yes, I know. So nightskyresourcecenter.org is sort of where I write a little bit about the night skies issues and dark skies. There's also a link there to my astrophotography that's on a separate site. So you can check out my images there as well.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you at home for joining us today. As a reminder, the show is listener supported. We rely exclusively on the support from you, the listener. If you like what you hear today, why not support the show? The show is recorded on August 24th. You can learn more about today's show by visiting our website, lightpollutionnews.com, and keep an eye out for us on whatever social channels you use. Thank you once again. Remember to only shine the light where it's needed.